All right, so today we're going deep on Elvis, but with a bit of a twist.
Yeah, a twist.
So, we all know the king, the music, the legend, but have you ever wondered what it was really like to be around Elvis, like behind the scenes?
Right behind the velvet rope.
Exactly. We're going to get a unique perspective from someone who saw it all firsthand, his personal nurse, Marian Cocke.
Yeah, and what makes this deep dive so interesting is that she cared for Elvis from 1975 to 1977.
Yeah.
A time when his health and personal life were, facing some real challenges.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just like a quick in and out kind of thing.
Oh,
Cocke worked with Elvis both in the hospital and later on at Graceland itself. So we're getting like a long-term view of his life, not just a snapshot.
it's like getting this backstage pass to Graceland. You get to understand Elvis beyond the performances and the fame.
Yeah, it's like we're unlocking a hidden door or something, right? Okay, so to set the stage here, Cocke, she wrote a book in 1979 detailing her experiences, and then she gave an interview years later. So we've got these multiple windows into her time with Elvis.
That's right.
But the thing that really jumped out at me at first was that she wasn't even an Elvis fan before becoming his nurse.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
Right.
So she's going into this without any preconceived notions, without that, that starstruck kind of awe that so many people felt.
Yeah, it's like she's seeing him as a patient first and a celebrity second.
Exactly.
Like almost like an unfiltered perspective.
Right, right. Makes you wonder if she was able to observe him in a more objective way because of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the hospital stays.
Yeah.
Cocke was working as a nursing supervisor at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis when Elvis was admitted not once, but twice in 1975.
Wow, 2 hospital stays in 1 year.
Yeah, this was a period when his health was really starting to decline.
Right. And while we can't get into specific medical details, just know that his health was a concern.
Yeah, and this wasn't just for like a checkup or anything.
Right.
During that second hospital stay, Elvis, he asked Cocke to stay overnight in his room, and she said he'd wake her up in the middle of the night saying, "I can't sleep. I can't sleep."
Wow. Think about the king of rock and roll, vulnerable and needing comfort in the middle of the night.
It really humanizes him, doesn't it?
It's like it strips away that larger than life persona.
Yeah.
And you see this very relatable side of him.
So after the second hospital stay, Elvis's personal physician, Dr. Nick, asked Cocke to become Elvis's personal nurse at Graceland.
Hold on. So she goes from the hospital to Graceland.
Oh.
This is getting interesting.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be a nurse in a hospital setting, but to become a live-in nurse, especially for someone as high profile as Elvis.
Right, that must have been a whole different ballgame.
Absolutely. There's so many questions about boundaries,
Yeah.
And the unique dynamic that must have existed.
And remember, this wasn't just a temporary gig.
No.
Cocke lived and worked at Graceland for over 2.5 years.
2.5 years, that's a huge chunk of time.
Yeah, imagine the stories she must have.
Right, she was there day in and day out,
Mm-hmm.
witnessing his routines, his interactions, everything away from the prying eyes of the public.
Yeah, and she described Elvis as too giving, even calling it his major fault.
Wow, too giving. That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
What do you think she meant by that?
It's a good question, right? Was it just genuine generosity, or was it maybe, a way to connect with people, or even maybe to deflect attention from his own struggles? I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It makes you think about the complexities of generosity, especially for someone in Elvis's position.
For sure. Okay, so let's fast forward to their last encounter. Cocke said they shared a hug, and Elvis told her, "Miss Cocke, I just want you to know the doors of this house will always be open for you."
Wow, that's really powerful.
It is, right? It's
Yeah.
like he's saying, you're always welcome here. You're part of the family.
Yeah, it suggests a deep level of respect and trust that goes beyond just a professional relationship.
And it leaves us with a lot to unpack as we delve deeper into Cocke's time at Graceland.
It does. We've only just scratched the surface.
Definitely, we'll be right back to explore Cocke's observations about Elvis's personality, his daily life at Graceland, and what it was really like to be part of his inner circle. So stick with us.
This is going to be good. So, we were talking about how Marian Cocke, she had this really unique perspective on Elvis, almost like an outsider looking in.
Right. And remember, she spent more than 2 years at Graceland, so it's not like she was just a casual visitor.
Exactly. She was immersed in his world, seeing him in his element away from the stage and the fans.
And what I found really interesting were her observations about Elvis's daily life. I mean, it wasn't all, parties and rock and roll, was
No,
it?
not at all, actually,
Yeah.
Cocke. She described him as being quite reclusive at times. Preferring the company of his close circle to the craziness of the outside world.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the guy was constantly in the spotlight. It must have been exhausting.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of his inner circle, she mentioned that he had this deep love for spiritual books and gospel music.
Really?
Yeah, it's a side of Elvis we don't often hear about. Adds another layer to his personality, this spiritual side, alongside the rock star image.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that people are complex.
Yeah.
We're not just one thing.
Right. And for someone like Elvis, who was always on display, that inner world, must have been really important to him.
Absolutely. But, it wasn't all serious introspection either. Cox, she also shared some stories about Elvis's playful side. She talked about his love for pranks and how he loved giving nicknames to everyone around him.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, he even called her Tennessee.
Oh, I love that it speaks to this sense of warmth and familiarity within his inner circle. It's like a reminder that even amidst all the fame and fortune, he was still capable of forming those genuine connections with people.
Right, and it makes you wonder, how much did his public persona, the king of rock and roll, actually reflect his true self?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think Cox's account, it gives us some clues. It allows us to peek behind the curtain and see a bit more of the real Elvis.
Yeah, and one thing that really stood out to me was how much she talked about his generosity, not just in terms of material things, but also, his willingness to give his time and attention to the people he cared about.
Right, like how he'd wake her up in the middle of the night just to talk.
Exactly. That's not something you'd expect from someone of his stature.
No, not at all. And
Yeah.
and it really reinforces that idea of him seeking connection, craving genuine interaction beyond, the superficiality that often comes with fame.
Yeah, it's like he was trying to break through that barrier.
It's also interesting to think about how Cox's role as a nurse might have influenced her relationship with Elvis. She was there to care for him, to see him at his most vulnerable.
That's a really good point. It's a different dynamic than, a friend or a bandmate.
Mm-hmm.
She was privy to a side of Elvis that very few people saw, a side that required a lot of trust.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, did that professional distance also allow her to see him more objectively?
It's possible. Remember, she wasn't a fan initially, so she didn't have that hero worship that might have clouded her judgment.
Right, she was able to see him with fresh eyes.
Exactly, to see both his strengths and his weaknesses.
And speaking of weaknesses, we do have to address the elephant in the room. Elvis's health was declining during this period, and there were a lot of rumors about prescription drug abuse.
Yeah, it's a difficult topic, but an important one to acknowledge.
Absolutely. And while we can't get into specifics, Cox's account, it does hint at the challenges that he was facing.
Yeah, it's clear that he was struggling.
It's a reminder that success doesn't always equal happiness or good health.
It's true, and it adds this layer of tragedy to his story.
Yeah.
We see this man who had it all, but who was also deeply troubled.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
But, even amidst all of that Cox account, it also reveals these moments of joy and humor and genuine connection.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom.
Right, so it's a very nuanced portrait. It's not just one-dimensional.
It's like she's giving us a glimpse into his soul, not just his public persona.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this deep dive so compelling. We're not just learning about Elvis the icon, but we're learning about Elvis the human being.
And ultimately, isn't that what makes any story truly fascinating?
I think so.
It's pretty amazing, that someone who wasn't even a fan got to see this really personal side of Elvis. Like, how often does that happen?
Right. You rarely get such an unfiltered perspective on someone so famous.
And what's really striking is that, Cox's account doesn't try to sugarcoat anything. She talks about his struggles, his flaws, but she also, really highlights his humanity, his kindness, his ability to connect with people.
Yeah, it's a very balanced portrayal, and it brings us back to that statement she made about him being too giving, which we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that now, having heard all of this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting statement, right? Because it could be interpreted in a lot of different ways.
Right. Was it coming from a genuine place? Or was it maybe, a way of dealing with the pressures of fame? I mean, it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, maybe he felt this need to give, to share his wealth as a way to compensate for the isolation and the demands of being Elvis.
Yeah, that's possible. Or maybe it was just a pure expression of his generosity. He had a big heart and he wanted to use it to help others.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about how generosity can be both a strength and a weakness, especially for someone in the public eye.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it makes you wonder if there's a connection between Elvis's giving nature and his own struggles with loneliness and vulnerability.
Right. Maybe giving to others was a way of filling a void within himself.
That's a really interesting thought, and it makes Cocke's observations all the more poignant. She wasn't blinded by the Elvis mystique. She saw him as a human being, flaws and all, and yet she was still touched by his kindness.
Yeah, remember that last encounter they had at Graceland where Elvis told her that the doors would always be open to her?
Yeah, it was such a genuine moment. It really showed the impact he had on the people around him, even those who weren't initially fans.
And it makes you think about what it is about certain people that draws others to them, that inspires such loyalty and affection.
That's a big question.
It is a huge question, right?
But I think for now,
Yeah.
we've learned a lot from Cocke's perspective on Elvis. We've explored the man behind the myth, the complexities of his character, and the power of human connection.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey.
It has, and I hope this deep dive has encouraged everyone listening to think critically about the stories we tell about celebrities and icons.
Right, to remember that behind the fame and the fortune, there are real people with real emotions just like us.
So as we wrap up this exploration of Elvis Presley through the eyes of his nurse, Marian Cocke, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, go for it.
The next time you hear a story about someone famous, or even someone you think you know really well, take a moment to consider the unseen layers, the complexities that might be hidden beneath the surface. Look for different perspectives. Challenge your own assumptions. And remember that every human life is a story worth exploring with empathy and an open mind.
I love that that's a perfect way to end this deep dive into the world of Elvis Presley and the unique perspective of his nurse, Marian Cocke.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.